Welcome if you're here. Just getting here if you're here online. We're so glad everybody's here this morning. We've gone through the thought exercise, a lot of us. I feel like it's fairly common, and I've taken us through it in past sermons, of imagining what life was like before electric lighting, right? And some of us have even come close to that experience when we've been in the backcountry and we haven't taken advantage of our high lumen headlights and our flashlights on our phones, but maybe just tried to live and navigate by the light of a campfire. A fire, a flame that is fragile and needs to be guarded and kind of lovingly tended as the only source of light, right, during the darkest hours of the cycle of our earth spinning around the sun. But until I had prepared for this sermon, I hadn't ever gone through the thought exercise of imagining what life would be like with salt, more than just a trip to the store away from my home, right? We've had that experience before of cooking dinner. It's like, oh my gosh, we're out of salt. Well, you can't make dinner without salt. Somebody runs to the store, picks up the salt, and brings it back. But what I didn't realize was that over 100, 150 years ago, salt was actually a fairly precious and rare commodity. It's modern geology, finding salt, it's modern technology, processing salt that has made it sort of ubiquitous and available to us. But it was not for most of human history. And it was so precious and so valuable that we know in the Roman Empire, soldiers were often paid in salt. That's where we get the expression, he's not worth his salt, right? Or the word salary, for example, comes from the root of the word salt. And salt was used, I think, before modern medicine. I think, salt is really important in medicine now. We know we have to balance our electrolytes. I rinse my nose out with salt rinse every morning. When I'm having surgery, I get a saline solution pumped through my veins. Really important still medically. But before the advent of modern medicine, right? How much more important to treat disease, to ward off infection, to draw out impurities. Salt was vital. And before refrigeration, to preserve food, right? Before kind of modern contracts came about, salt was actually used in the sealing of contracts. So precious, so valuable, so important. And of course, we all know, salt, a dish without salt, or a dish with too much salt. Not something you probably want to eat. So as I thought about today's gospel reading in these familiar words of, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world, I got to wondering, who exactly is Jesus talking to? This is part of the Sermon on the Mount, which begins with the most famous part of it, the Beatitudes that we heard last week, and goes on to this pretty well-known part, and goes on for another 2.5 chapters. Jesus talks a lot. And it says at the beginning, seeing the crowds that were drawn to him, he went up a mountain and sat down, and his disciples followed him, those who were closest to him, and sat down around him. So I started wondering, is this really just for those who were closest to him, or is this for everybody? And I flipped ahead 2.5 chapters, and I got to the end of chapter 7, and it said, and the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught them as one with authority. Question answered. Right, so you can picture the scene, and those of you who have been to the Holy Land will know, and I know from a painting that has hung on the wall of our lobby for a number of years, the Sermon on the Mount was actually more of like the sermon on an incline, like a hill maybe, it would be generous even, along the edge of the Sea of Galilee. And I know from the painting too that this hill field can be covered in mustard in the springtime, as our hills and our fields are in the Napa Valley today. So there's the scene. Jesus goes up this hill, maybe sits down on a rock. His disciples gather around him, but there's a crowd. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And who are these people? Well, we know and we think of Galilee as kind of a backwater, and Jesus came from a backwater, and that's true. But it was also very near a major Roman metropolis that was just being built in Jesus's day. And it was both a backwater and kind of a major crossroads. And you can tell from the type of people who start asking questions right after the Sermon on the Mount that we're meant to think these are kind of all sorts and conditions of people here, to use our Right One language. There are a lot of different kinds of people gathered. Certainly the downtrodden, the poor, the outcast, the lost, those who Jesus is speaking to in the Beatitudes, right? The grieving, the poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who are merciful, those who are humble, those are the peacemakers. But all kinds of people. And what do they have in common? Well, they have left everything behind, whether forever, or for a day, or for an hour, to come and listen to Jesus. Because there's something there for them. There's something that they're seeking. There's something that they're drawn to in him. That's it. I mean, that's the common denominator I can see, other than the fact that they were probably all Jewish, or most of them were Jewish. And Jesus says to them, and Jesus says to us, because note that other than being Jewish, that common denominator applies to all of us. We have all taken at least an hour out of our day, left everything behind, and tuned in or showed up because there's something. There's something more for us. There's something that we're seeking, that we're drawn to in Jesus. We believe that there's something more than just what we can see and touch in this world, and that that's important. And so Jesus says to them, and Jesus says to us, you all listening, you are the salt of the earth. Think about how important salt is, right? Remember that. You are the precious, preservative, seasoning, healing agent of this earth. You are the light of the world. Like light that makes everything visible, that makes everything possible, that makes life itself possible. And here we are thinking we just showed up today. Right? You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. It seems to me to be a pretty tall order, especially when I look around today. Right? I'm supposed to be the light of the world. I'm supposed to be the salt of the earth. Yikes. Yikes. But it's not prescriptive. And he doesn't say, now y'all go work really hard and be the salt of the earth and be the light of the world. This is something you got to do, you know. It's descriptive. He says, you are this. So there's something in that common denominator about showing up, about having a hunch, about believing and placing our trust in the fact that there must be something more that is the salt that the earth needs, that is the light that the world needs, and we are it. I was talking with my buddy Mac the other day. We have coffee from time to time. And, he said, there's just a lot of people out there who just don't care about God. Just doesn't make any difference in their lives. And here I am, here we are. We got this whole church thing going, and we're, as seekers, as spiritual people trying to get closer to God and have this experience of God. And it seems like there's a lot of people out there who just don't live on that plane at all. Like it just doesn't occur to them. It doesn't matter. They're just focused on what they can see. They're focused on the here and now. They're focused on what they can get. They're focused on what they think is best for them. And even that moral compass, I said, even that sense inside of us that something is right or something is wrong seems to go by the wayside because it doesn't matter. What matters is what they can get, right? What's best for them. The one with the most toys wins, right? And we were sort of scratching our heads about this. Here's a couple priests over coffee just scratching our heads, And we think, do they get to the end of their lives? They start to think, well, maybe time's up. Maybe I wonder if there's something more than what I can see, right? Than what I can get for myself, than what I can amount and the power that I can amass. I wonder about that. I wonder. But I know what the salt is. And I know what the light is. And I know that we all have a sense of that we all are that. I started to think about, gosh, is there a word for that? What if I were just to say in one word what it is that we're called to go out and be salt and light? What is that? And I remembered something that happened to me just this last week. We have our star words around for this season of Epiphany. I hope you've got one. If you haven't, they're hiding. There's still plenty around. You have to, it's like an Easter egg hunt now. You have to look for them down on the pews and up on the walls and around the campus. Each star we put up for the season of Epiphany has a different, unique word on the back, and you're meant to see which one calls out to you and take it down and use that as kind of a guiding light for your new year, to meditate on it, pray on it. So if you haven't got your star word yet, there's one more week before we take them down for Lent. And I usually wind up with 2 stars. Usually one star just finds me, sticks to the bottom of my foot, or it gets chucked across the room like a ninja star by a kid or something, and I wind up with that star. And then I also wind up with the one that I discern and pick and pull off the wall. So I've got these 2 kind of together. Well, at our staff meeting on Tuesday morning, I was sitting looking out into the courtyard, and the light came into the courtyard. And it shined. There were 2 stars on the window of the nursery building, just on this side. And it shined on one of the stars, and the light bounced back into my eyes so bright, it was almost blinding. And I thought, okay, maybe I have a 3rd star this year. Maybe I'm supposed to go get that off the wall. But I went through my morning, and I kind of forgot about it. It got to be afternoon. And there's a gentleman who just kind of sometimes just comes and sits here and hangs out. And I see him sort of hanging out around town, other places too, other churches. And he was just sitting on the pew right outside the nursery, right under that star. And I thought, oh, look at that. He's under the star. I wonder if I'm supposed to go talk to him and interact in some way. Didn't do it, forgot, continued with my day, went on. A few days went by, and I thought, oh, yeah, I remember that star. I was supposed to get that star. I missed talking to that guy. Just go see what that star says. So I pulled it off the wall. What do you think the word was? You can't read it from there. Faith. Faith. What? Faith. Faith was the word. It's not too often. It's happened maybe one other time before where I felt like I got a star word, but was all of our star word. The star for our whole church, our whole community. And I thought of that, because then I just stuck this, faith, that's nice. And I stuck it on my desk. And I went along my week until I was getting ready for the sermon this morning and thinking about our call to be salt and light. What it is that we take to the world. There is no inferiority complex when it comes to faith. You are here and you are seeking, and you have either a hunch or a conviction that there is something more to this world than what meets the eye. That what we do matters. That what we do matters beyond just what we can accumulate and what's best for me, but that what the world needs is love, is compassion, is connection, is self-giving. That is our call, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And no matter what the world throws at us in terms of blandness or in terms of darkness, we are called in that to be the opposite, to be the bringers of flavor, of life, of energy, of light. And what we have to offer is simply what's in us, right? What's in us, even if all it feels like is questions or a continual seeking, even if some days you feel like you don't have it, and you have to rely on the salt and the faith and the light that others have in this community. I see you doing this in so many ways. We could be here for hours while I told you about it. All the different ways that I see you being salt and being light. It's incredible. There's one thing that happened last night that I want to tell you about, because it was just a way, it's something that, maybe we wouldn't have thought of this as being a light, salty, lighty thing. But Braulio and Belli both they discovered a common love for karaoke. And they said, hey, let's have a karaoke night. And so 30, 40 people came, from literally babies 6 months old to people in their 80s, right? A huge gamut of people, Latino people, English-speaking people, music all over the gamut, everything from Moana to Ice Ice Baby to what else we had, our mariachi song. And our youth group was there singing in force. And most of the people there were not from this church. It was a total mix. And people got to come and just experience a moment of lightness, a moment of community, a moment of welcome in the midst of so much darkness. That's salt and light through karaoke. There's a gazillion ways to do it. There are so many ways to do it. There's a couple quick warnings on the salt shaker. And I'm going to throw those at you really fast. 1, the salt can't stay in the shaker, right? I have never found, there's a lot of churches and ministries called Lighthouse. I've never seen one called Salt Shaker, but this is us. We're the salt shaker. The salt, in order to do its job, has got to go be sprinkled around, right? That's number 1. Number 2, this weird thing about salt losing its saltiness, I've always scratched my head about that. I've never known salt that stopped being salty, but apparently maybe some Dead Sea salts as a different formulation and can lose its saltiness. There's something in Jesus's context that he's talking about and referring to that we don't know that they did. But the point is, don't lose it. What you have, even if it's just questions, even if it's just wondering and seeking and sensing that there's something more, there has to be something more. Don't lose that. And number 3, there's such a thing as too much salt. We all know that, right? And I think it's the most fundamental problem of Christianity today, right? Christians for centuries, maybe especially in the last century, have laid it on too thick. And so what we've gotten the reputation of is being acerbic, bitter, judgmental, hypocritical. These are synonyms for Christian in most of the culture, right? And so what we're called to offer is the kind of salt that is primarily action. And then it's attributed to St. Francis. We don't know who really said it. He said, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words, right? In our lives, right? Through our actions, we show that we do believe, we do trust, we do place our hearts in, we do stake our lives on the fact that there is something more. There is something beyond this limited, material, zero-sum game that the world wants us to believe that we're playing. We're going to play by a different set of rules. And people see that. And then the light grows. And the salt does its job. So to paraphrase the Dos Equis International Man of Mystery, stay salty, my friends. I have said these things to you in the name of our friend and Savior, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Amen.